Welcome back. Now, Amnesty International says that President Cyril Ramaphosa continues to fail the nation on the delivery of basic human rights. The organization has said that the president is not fulfilling his duty as a leader of the country. Now, basic services such as access to water, escalating load shedding are placing increased pressure on aging and under-maintained systems, and this threatens the right of millions of South Africans from accessing safe, sufficient and reliable services. Now, commenting on the budget speech yesterday, Amnesty International said that the 2023 budget falls short of actually outlining how government will safeguard human rights in the face of turbulent times and corruption. Shenilla Mohamed is the Executive Director of Amnesty International South Africa, and she joins us now virtually. Shenilla, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to your viewers.
So just off the top, before we actually get into your later comments, what were your key takeaways from yesterday's budget speech?
Well, Sakina, I think, the reality is that it was not a human rights friendly budget. I mean, while we understand the need to focus on, debt repayment and getting Eskom, into rescue. But the truth of the matter is that, all of that, the state that Eskom is in at the moment, it was really caused by corruption, mismanagement by the state. And, as a result of that, a lot of basic essential rights that the people of South Africa, have been deprived of will continue to be, out of reach for them. And I think, the reality is that we haven't seen in yesterday's budget, we have not seen anything that is going to tell us that people's lives are going to be better in the next year. In fact, even the COVID grant falls short of inflation. And, to be honest, 350 Rand plus the 5% increase is not even going to give people a loaf of bread every day. So I think, the government keeps on putting plaster and trying to appease the people. But actually, at the end of the day, they have failed us dismally and continue to fail us. And the budget yesterday, again, shows that human rights and rights of the people of this country are not top of their list.
So just drilling down into that a little bit, you issued a thread on social media yesterday about the budget and the shortfalls as you outlined during that thread. You basically spoke about how government, is failing to safeguard human rights in the face of turbulent times and corruption, which you acknowledge. But then you also go on to point out that the protection and realization of human rights should not come at the expense of bailing out government institutions that have been weakened by corruption. So let's talk about that a little more, because I think this is a bugbear for many South Africans. The fact that you, for example, are paying for services from Eskom, and then you still have to pay for the corruption that has taken place by government now taking on that debt, or you would have probably paid for it anyway as Eskom continues to receive bailouts from government. So what would you have liked to hear more explicitly addressed in terms of those issues that you outline in the thread?
Well, I think, Sakina, I think you're spot on. I mean, the fact that, we're having to bail out these state-owned enterprises is really because of the mismanagement of the state. And one of the things that we say consistently is the buck ends with Cyril Ramaphosa. He is the man in charge who has been put by the people in charge of this country, and he is failing us consistently. And I think that, what we would have liked to see in the budget is an increase in healthcare facilities. I mean, the majority of people in this country do not have access to quality healthcare. We see the hospitals falling apart. We see that, 200 hospitals have applied now to be exempt from load shedding, but of those, only 70 have been granted permission. What happens to the others? And most of these hospitals are in the poorer communities or in the poorer areas. We see education. We see pit latrines that continue to be a danger to our children in schools. And let's not forget gender-based violence, Sakina. A lot of talk, a lot of promises made by the president president, and yet what has come out of it? People are dying here on a daily basis. What has happened to all that money that was put aside? So what we would have liked to see in the budget is some real concrete plans or budget set aside to really deal with the scourges that are facing people in this country. Women and children are not safe. The state is doing nothing about it. And, you know, at the end of the day, I think it's great that the NPA now has a special unit that will, you know, deal with Zondo Commission recommendations. But what about a special commission to deal with gender-based violence? I mean, one of the things we've seen, Sakina, is that when there's a case of gender-based violence, the problem is the police. The police are not trained to gather the forensic evidence, and as a result, cases that go to court, you know, are thrown out of court. And so women die and there is no justice. So what we wanted to see in the budget is also a way in to cushion people from the really horrible food price increases, inflation, etc. And, you know, a basic income grant should have been at least talked about or put into place. And, you know, at the end of the day, the majority of people in this country cannot afford 3 meals a day. And I think, you know, that is what we wanted to see. Water, Sakina. You know, people don't have water. So, you know, there's a lot of basic human rights that the majority of people in this country are not seeing. And yet we are consistently bailing out SOEs because of corruption and mismanagement, and that has got to stop now.
And the reality is, Shenilla, it's not just the bailout of the SOEs, you know, also pointed out yesterday in that budget. It's the bailing out of municipalities who are at the coalface of service delivery, who are also failing to deliver these basic and inalienable human rights. You know, access to water, access to, you know, safety and security, safety of person, you know, safety of whatever your possessions may be. Those are not things that someone has to really go and speak to the president about, because it should be given that we all understand what that means. But I want to talk to you about that in the context of South Africans and actually knowing their rights. Do we do enough work in that regard? Are South Africans actually good enough at enforcing that government delivers on those basic inalienable rights?
I think South Africans are great in the sense that they know their rights, and that, you know, South Africans have a history and come from a history of fighting for their basic human rights. And I think that, you know, what's happened over the past, and I think COVID has contributed to this, is that, you know, people have become tired, Sakina. And I think people have really started to lose faith, and, you know, people have no faith that the state is going to actually deliver. And I think that's what we found. And one of the things we try to do is really get people to understand that the power lies in their hands. These are government officials that have been put there by us. And, you know, we need to take, you know, ownership of that and say, okay, how do we ensure that we get the government that we deserve? And one of the ways of doing that is really knowing your rights, but then also being prepared to fight for those rights. I mean, you know, I think toy-toying in the street is fine, but I do think that, you know, we've seen in the past that when you toy-toy in the street, it does have some impact, but we do need to follow that up with, you know, legal challenges and other things that would force the state to deliver on basic human rights. I mean, the problem we're facing, you know, Sakina, is, for example, whistleblowers. What I would have liked to see in the budget this year is a budget that was going to provide more protection for whistleblowers. You know, as Amnesty, we continue to support and protect whistleblowers because they receive no support and protection. And, you know, what we've seen in our work is that people are now beginning to believe that it's not worth it. It's not worth dying for. It's not worth their families being brutalized for. And I think that is a sad state of affairs when citizens of the country really feel powerless. And, you know, what we want to call on South Africans to do is take back your power. Really know that the future of this country lies in your hands and you have the power to change it. And the first step to that is know what your constitutional rights are and know how you can access them. And I think, you know, South Africans have a lot of power, and they just need to harness that power to make sure that the leaders do what is right for the people and not what is right for themselves.
Indeed. And, you know, I'm reminded of a time during the early years of our democracy where you would be able to access those little booklets, the Constitution booklets, and they were all over. You could just grab one at the post office. They were in school libraries. Wherever you went, you could easily access them. Not so easy to access these days. You'll be told that things are online, but I'm not sure how helpful and how useful that is, because it also is based on the assumption that people would have access to such.
Absolutely. And Sakina, what's different from those days, I think, to now is that there's a real fear in people, which, we have picked up, that, they don't want to be the ones who are going to be targeted. They don't want to be the ones who are going to be, their families, attacked. I mean, if you even look at the reactions, for example, to Under the Rator's interview, rather than, the state or somebody saying, okay, let's look at what accusations are being made and let's deal with them, they are attacks on him personally. And I think that is the challenge we're facing in this country, that when somebody steps up and starts to talk about the rot and corruption, they fear for their lives. And we see Abashlale, Masanjadolo. I mean, we are now working with them in the sense that we are documenting a lot of the human rights defenders that are being assassinated, and really we are now becoming a state where if you stand up and fight for your rights, your life is in danger. And we have to turn that around, Sakina. We have to find ways to make sure that if you stand up for your rights, you are protected not only by the state, but also by the rights enshrined in the Constitution. And I think we can do that. And we just have to come together as South Africans and say, we are not going to be silenced. South Africans were never silenced during the fight for apartheid. And this is not the time to be silenced.
And you further went on to say in your statement that, further dithering on this cannot be tolerated, and also that lip service won't be tolerated anymore. So in terms of your expectations from the president in making sure that those rights enshrined in the Constitution are actually realized by the people who live in this country, what do you plan to do as a human rights watchdog beyond what we have seen? Because as you say, people are scared. People are those who have blown the whistle previously and come forward in order to try and assist. They've been victimized, or worse, they've been killed in some instances. So as a watchdog, how are you going to take this fight forward?
Well, one of the things we do, Sakina, is we do, say to people, if you have problems, if you don't know, what your rights are, if you don't know what to do once you know what your rights are, contact us. We will put you in the right direction. We'll tell you, who you can work with in order to get your rights realized. But the second thing we do is we are constantly putting pressure on the state. At the moment, we are putting pressure on the state to eradicate pit latrines. We are looking at, where's the money gone with regards to the Gender-Based Violence Fund, because, we haven't seen any concrete action come out of that yet. So, we are consistently monitoring what the state is saying versus what the state has delivered. And I think, my call to people out there is that if you are, feeling threatened, or if you do feel that, your rights are violated, then, get in touch with Amnesty International South Africa, and we will definitely try to assist, and we will put you in touch with people who can help you. But don't feel helpless. As a human rights organization, we are there to support people to access their basic human rights. That is what we do. We are also a research organization, so we document rights violations. And I think that, that evidence has been used in many court cases to try to get people to get the state to deliver on rights. So, as a human rights organization, we will continue with our movement, which is made up of people who take injustice personally to fight for rights. And, that is basically what we do. And we would like to encourage people to, become part of a movement that takes injustice personally, but also, we are here to help and support people in any way that we possibly can.
Shenilla Mohamed, Executive Director of Amnesty International, thank you so much for your time. Shenilla, discussing their views on what the organization argues is a failure by government to deliver basic human rights to the public.